Coca-Cola just filed a warn notice to lay off 175 workers at its Northampton, Massachusetts plant. The notice, filed June 15, 2026, lists the production facility on Industrial Drive. Layoffs begin August 15th. The plant makes Minute Maid and Powerade, and it closes permanently on December 15th. What Northampton officials said they were most worried about losing wasn't the jobs. Representative Lindsay Sabadosa, who represents Northampton in the state legislature, said in June that the focus for area officials would be finding another employer for this specific building, not just one that hires people, but one that uses high volumes of water. When a facility closes, the replacement conversation usually starts with headcount, with payroll, with what the workforce needs next. In Northampton, it started with the pipe. The city has roughly 29,000 residents and sits in the western part of Massachusetts, built around Cooley Dickinson Hospital and Smith College, with a downtown that doesn't suggest obvious economic distress. What it also has, until December 15th, is the largest single industrial water user in the city. At a city council meeting on March 19th, DPW Director Donna Lascalea presented figures showing that the Coca-Cola facility had accounted for roughly 25% of Northampton's total water and sewer use. A single facility, a quarter of the system. To understand why that number matters, it helps to understand how municipal water pricing actually works. A city's water infrastructure carries fixed costs that exist regardless of how much water flows through it: the treatment plant, the pipes, the equipment to run them. Those costs have to be recovered from customers. When a large industrial facility buys water at high volume, the revenue it generates absorbs a disproportionate share of that fixed cost base. In practice, that means the commercial customers' payments are effectively subsidizing the rate that residential customers pay. The anchor customer's presence keeps household bills lower than they'd be if the same infrastructure costs had to be spread across only residential accounts. Remove the anchor and the math doesn't change, but who pays it does. Representative Sabadosa was explicit about this in June. The bottling plant was designed to consume large quantities of water at a commercial rate, and that rate is part of what kept residential bills in Northampton lower than they'd otherwise be. The city doesn't just need another employer for this address. It needs another large buyer for its water system, something that occupies the base of the rate structure the way the bottling plant has for 30 years. What that means in practical terms is that not just any employer will do for this building. The next tenant for Industrial Drive needs to be in a water-intensive industry, food and beverage production, certain kinds of manufacturing, something purpose-built around high throughput. That narrows the pool considerably. City officials know what they're looking for. Whether it arrives quickly is a separate question. Most of the coverage of this closure has focused on the 175 workers. The water economics running underneath that number have moved more slowly through the public conversation, which is generally how it goes with municipal utility financing. Coca-Cola has been at this address since 1995, when the company purchased an existing production facility from the Mid-Atlantic Canners Association. The building on Industrial Drive was already operational when the deal closed. Coca-Cola didn't build Northampton's industrial base. It bought a position in one, and over the years that followed the plant became the city's largest industrial water customer and one of its more reliable private employers. It's the kind of operation a city stops treating as a variable and starts treating as a fixture. For most of those 3 decades, the plant ran without attracting much external notice, which is another way of saying it did what a stable manufacturing employer is supposed to do. Workers commuted in, made beverages, and went home to Northampton and the surrounding towns, and the plant was there the next morning. At its peak, it was drawing a quarter of the city's total water and sewer throughput and sustaining payroll for several hundred people in a city of 29,000. For a city that size, the economic footprint of an operation like this runs deeper than a headcount. It anchors the water rate structure. It generates property tax revenue. It provides the kind of steady employment that doesn't produce press releases because nothing about it is unusual enough to require one. In 2011, the facility expanded. 13,000 square feet were added to the production operation at a cost of $50 million, and roughly 100 additional positions came with the project. The expansion was reported locally. A company committing $50 million to a site is not, at that moment, sending a signal about its plans to leave, or at least that's the reasonable read at the time the investment is announced. 10 years later, Coca-Cola announced it would close the plant. The 2021 announcement named Northampton alongside a facility in American Canyon, California, and framed both closures as part of a broader restructuring of the company's North American bottling network, what Coca-Cola has referred to internally as its asset-right strategy, a program to concentrate production around fewer, higher efficiency sites. The product lines the Northampton plant ran weren't struggling. Coca-Cola as a company was operating and growing. The decision was structural, a determination that the network could be made more efficient around fewer production sites, and that this facility, with its age and cost structure and geography, wasn't among the ones that made the cut. The logic isn't hard to follow. It just doesn't make a satisfying explanation for the people it covers. The workers at the Northampton plant were not represented by a union. That fact shaped most of what the next 5 years looked like. Without a collective bargaining agreement, there was no structure obligating Coca-Cola to negotiate the timeline with the workforce, no contractual floor for severance above the legal minimum, and no institutional mechanism through which workers could push for more than federal law already required. The Federal WARN Act required 60 days of advance notice before layoffs. Massachusetts also has its own state-level WARN provisions, requirements that apply specifically to larger Massachusetts employers and carry their own notification obligations. But the floor those laws collectively set was, in the absence of a union contract, also essentially the ceiling. The original closure date was 2023. The year arrived and the plant stayed open. There was no formal public explanation of the delay, no revised date circulated to workers, no structured communication that let people make informed decisions about whether to stay or start looking elsewhere. Some workers had been at this facility since before the 2011 expansion, approaching 15 or 20 years at a building that had announced it was ending, still drawing a paycheck, but without reliable information about when that stopped. Whether to wait, whether to leave on their own terms before any company-initiated process began, what to tell a bank about employment stability, all of that was being worked through individually, against a backdrop that offered no clear answer. That condition lasted, in various forms, for close to 5 years. The plant kept running during that time, but it was winding down in ways the water data recorded. DPW Director Lascalea reported at the March Council meeting that the facility's water consumption had been declining steadily since the 2021 announcement. By fiscal year 2026, the plant's share of Northampton's total water and sewer use had dropped from roughly 25% to about 14%. The facility was already partway gone while it was still nominally open. The anchor's departure wasn't a single event arriving in December. It had been a process that the water meters had been registering for years, every time a reading was taken. In 2023, Northampton raised its base water and sewer rates by more than 200%. The increase applied to most homeowners in the city. Raising utility rates is not the path of least resistance for a municipal government. The incentive, when facing a projected future revenue gap, is usually to wait and see whether the gap actually opens before asking residents to pay for it. Northampton didn't wait. City officials looked at the Department of Public Works numbers, understood what losing 25% of system revenue over the coming years would mean to the city's Water Enterprise Fund, the segregated account that finances the entire water and sewer operation, and moved the rate structure to where it needed to be before the closure was complete, rather than after. The 200% increase was large enough that it didn't go unnoticed. Local reporting covered it, and the connection between the increase and the anticipated Coca-Cola departure wasn't obscured. The cost was spread across utility bills over several years, absorbed gradually rather than landing as a single shock, and that, it turned out, was enough. Mayor Gina-Louise Sciarra confirmed in June that because the city raised rates in 2023, the Water Enterprise Fund had stabilised. She said Northampton would likely not need to alter water rates further as a result of the December closure. Her gravest concern, she said, was the 175 workers. This is the part of the Northampton story that the national coverage of the WEAR filing didn't quite reach. The fiscal disruption that a plant closure of this scale normally produces, including the utility revenue gap, the budget pressure, and the hard conversation about what gets cut or raised on short notice, was largely absorbed in advance. Northampton planned for a departure it couldn't prevent, priced the loss into its rate structure while the plant was still running, and distributed the cost across 3 years of homeowner bills instead of arriving at December 2026 with the problem still open. That's not the typical outcome for a city in this position. The Northampton closure is also part of a broader pattern. Campbell's recently shuttered its Hyannis, Massachusetts facility, where Cape Cod chips and Kettle brand chips were produced. Zipcar announced plans to close its Boston headquarters. Nationally, Reyes Coca-Cola Bottling closed its Ventura, California plant in July with 85 workers, and Great Lakes Coca-Cola Distribution closed its Lansing, Michigan site, affecting 161 workers earlier this year. These are movements and networks being reshaped, not isolated local events. The products will keep reaching consumers in every city where they're sold. Minute Maid and Powerade will still be available in Northampton. The consolidation affects where they're produced, not whether they arrive. City officials are already looking for the next tenant for Industrial Drive, and they're specific about the requirement. The building was designed around high-volume water consumption, and whatever industry eventually occupies it needs to use water at commercial scale for the rate structure to function the way it has. The DPW has run those numbers. After 3 years of working through a 200% rate increase with residents, the city has a clear picture of what it costs to lose a customer like this and what it needs in a replacement. The water system will adjust. It's already most of the way there, and the building on Industrial Drive will find another use. What hasn't been resolved, and what no rate schedule has a column for, is what comes next for 175 people who kept going to work through 5 years of a closure that kept not arriving, with no union, no contract protection beyond what the law requires, and no clear word from the company until a WARN notice landed on June 15th. Layoffs begin in 16 days.